Warning, the following program has been rated T for truth.
You can't handle the truth!
Oh, we think you can. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report with your host, truth warrior and mythbuster Kathleen Wells. The place where we distinguish fact from fiction, where data is used to drive points home, and where Kathleen takes the position that Democrats and black politicians have destroyed black America. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report. Now, your host, Kathleen Wells.
Welcome to the Naked Truth Report, Truth Warriors and Mythbusters. I'm your host, Kathleen Wells. Let's see, what do I want to say? My dad used to always tell me, intelligent people have an open mind. He would always say that to me. He wanted me to be open-minded. Democrats, the left, always miss their target. They never land on the target. They're always behind the 8 ball. They had us spending, 3.5 years at least on Russia collusion, the Russia fake story. But the biggest threat to the United States is not Russia, it's China. And that's why I brought back Dr. Chen. We're doing part 2 with Dr. Chen, China, Communism, and Coronavirus. But I think this one will be titled, The Biggest Threat to the United States is China. And in parentheses, not Russia. The biggest threat to the United States is China. Also, another subtitle would be China, Communist China infiltrating the United States. Yes. Devin Nunes spoke about how the Brookings Institute, we're going to find out how the Russian collusion story or narrative that was pushed by the left was fake. We're going to find that out when the Durham report comes out, which would be very soon. Also, Devin Nunes, it's not Devin Nunes. Yeah, it is Devin. I said David before, but it's Devin Nunes informed us that now the Brookings Institute, the think tank, that left-leaning think tank, was involved with the Steele dossier. Oh, we cannot wait for the Durham report to come out. But the most important thing we want to focus on now is what? China. Communist China is infiltrating the United States. So, welcome to the Naked Truth Report. Again, Dr. Chen, I really appreciate you being here.
I'm glad to be here again, Kathleen.
So tell us, is China a threat to the United States?
This is perfect timing to discuss this because Chinese consulate in Houston just closed a couple of days ago, and because it's accused by the State Department as a spy hub. So tonight, I want to focus on this topic about what Chinese embassy and the consulates do in the U.S. And so I came to the United States in 1994 as a student to study science. And the first thing I noticed about the Chinese consulate, I was shocked. It was my personal experience in year 2000 when I was still a graduate student at Caltech. And one of my best friends was Chinese Student Club, Chinese Student Association's president. And one day he suddenly told me, Wen, you should be careful because you always speak on human rights in China. The Chinese consulate asked me to report your activities to them. Isn't that shocking? That's actually one of the primary roles of the Chinese consulate. They monitor the speech and activities of Chinese Americans and visiting Chinese students and scholars through the Chinese Student and Scholar Association. And what will happen if one speaks against the Chinese Communist Party in the United States? If you are a Chinese citizen, then oftentimes you have to visit Chinese consulates to renew your passport. And if you're an American citizen, oftentimes you have to go to Chinese consulate to apply for a visa if you want to go to China to see your family. And what happened is that, when you renew your passport, and they will ask you, you should stop criticizing human rights in China. You should give up the practice of Falun Gong because the Communist Party doesn't like it, and it's independent thinking. and all you have to be a spy working for the Chinese Communist Party. And if you say no, your passport will be confiscated. And one of my best friends, he was a student at the University of Southern California, because he refused to give up the practice of Falun Gong, the Chinese meditation that's under persecution by the Communist Party. His passport was confiscated when he tried to renew it. And that story went to Los Angeles Times. And after the story was published on Los Angeles Times, and the USC's president wrote a letter to the Chinese consulate to return his passport, he finally got his passport back with a big sign of cancelled. So basically it became an invalid passport. And because of that, he had to apply for political asylum and stayed in the United States. And that's just one example how the Chinese consulate operate in the U.S. to threaten Chinese Americans. And we have heard numerous stories about American scholars trying to visit China, and they were not allowed to go because the Chinese consulate refused to give them visa because they openly criticized the human rights in China. And another conflict. Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say, isn't a Chinese scientist in taking refuge in the San Francisco consulate right now as we speak?
Yes, that is very recent news. The Chinese consulate in San Francisco has been hosting one of the Chinese visiting scholars from UC Davis. And actually, as of just a couple of days ago, she left the Chinese consulate in San Francisco, and she was arrested immediately. And that was just one of the 4 spies that Department of Justice trying to arrest recently. Actually, there were 4 spies in the past 2 months arrested because of their affiliation with the Chinese military. And 3 of them were from the medical field, and the one just got arrested outside of Chinese consulate in San Francisco was called Jen Tang, and she was a Chinese visiting scholar holding a J1 visa. That means she was sponsored by the Chinese government to visit the U.S. She actually did some research on medical research at UC Davis. And there were 2 other visiting scholars, Xin Wang, who was from UC San Francisco, and Chen from Stanford University. And all 3 of them had affiliation with Chinese military, and they lied to the U.S. government, to FBI, about their affiliation, and they were arrested because of that. And the 4th one is called Kai Zhao. He was studying at Indiana University on artificial intelligence. He also lied about his affiliation with the Chinese military. And that is just one of the examples of how China sent spies and pretending that they were just regular students or visiting scholars. They did research in American labs with the funding sponsored by American taxpayers. And the purpose was to steal the intellectual property and create shadow labs in China. For example, Xin Wang already visited, one of the spies who was arrested from the UC San Francisco. He already helped China to create a copy of the lab in China. So that is one of the examples. And another purpose of sending these spies or visiting scholars is to influence American people. For example, also in UC Davis, several Chinese visiting scholars formed the Chinese Communist Party chapter on campus. And of course, later that was exposed and they had to stop that. But that was just one of the Chinese Communist Party chapters that was called in universities or companies in the United States, set by Chinese visiting scholars.
So what is their intent? Is to influence our culture, to have the culture be to become more dominant in the world or geopolitically, or to have the United States succumb to communism? What is the purpose?
Both purpose. So actually, the Chinese consulates and embassy, they have a big picture of that, like they have a big picture of like working on every aspect, from stealing intellectual property to influence the way Americans think, both. Like I just mentioned at the beginning of my talk, like how Chinese consulate monitored Chinese students and Chinese Americans, and because like these are easy targets, because like as a Chinese American, very likely like they can control your speech, they can control which political candidate you endorse. You see like many Chinese business association, many Chinese business owners, they would speak on behalf of Chinese government. Although they are Americans, they are either willingly or unwillingly or threatened to keep in line with the requirement of the Chinese government. At the same time, the Chinese consulates oftentimes threaten United States officials to remain silent towards human rights abuses in China and not to support Falun Gong, not to support Tibet, Uyghurs, Taiwan, or Hong Kong. They actually openly wrote letters or made phone calls to United States elected officials. For example, in 2017, the California State Senate tried to pass a resolution against forced organ harvesting in China. The Chinese consulate in San Francisco called the California State Senator President Kevin DeLeon, and because DeLeon is the majority leader of the Democrats, so under his rule, he blocked that resolution. That was just one example. And the Chinese consulate also threatened Caltech to cancel a Falun Gong workshop, and also threatened Pasadena Civic Auditorium to block, not to rent their facilities to Caltech students to hold a Falun Gong related conference. And those are like just typical. That's like day-to-day job. And they also actively recruited successful Americans to go to red carpet trips in China. Like once they go to China, they get very nice treated. And of course, one of the major purposes is to get Americans to invest in China because money sponsors the Communist Party. And they also turn these American politicians, American business owners, to be their agents, to lobby for them in the United States. You see many like big business owners speak nice about the Communist Party, and because they have like they make profits in China, and they have many reasons to do so. And of course, like these successful Americans, they are required to endorse political candidates that the Chinese government favor. Yeah, and that's one part about the influence and mind of the Americans. And the steal of intellectual property in the U.S. is another part. Like we have heard all the time about like how hackers from China attacked the U.S. companies, attacked the universities, and to steal data like from our research field. But that's just part of it. Actually, the Communist Party openly sent many spies, like those spies I just mentioned, those 4 spies just got arrested, was just a tip of iceberg. There are many, many more activities besides that. And one of the very, very famous ones, you probably already heard about it, was to recruit successful American scientists into China's Thousand Talents program. So basically, we're talking about like professors and principal investigators in universities. To like they already get fundings from United States federal government to do their research, and China would give them some funding to go to China and to establish a shadow lab to copy everything they did in the U.S. to China and get publications. And actually, Charles Laver, the chair of Harvard University Chemistry Department, was arrested in January this year because he was recruited into the Thousand Talents program of China. And there are many, many top American scientists who were lured into that money trap. Besides that, Chinese government also fund research programs in top universities. And for example, like Huawei, we've talked last time about Huawei's 5G, right? But like, Huawei is just a Chinese company. They actually offer $300 million per year for universities, top universities all over the world to do some basic research, and most of this research actually has a specific target to help Huawei to solve technical problems. So they actually, by spending some a little bit of money, they can recruit the very, very best technology and science expertise in the United States and top universities to do research for them and to develop their technology. And all of these actually are the original funding. These are the researchers that many of them already got funding from other countries like the United States or in British government. They also spend a lot of money and have to deal with Huawei's infiltration to their universities. So that's another way of steal of intellectual property. And some people ask me, why China has to steal intellectual property? And you have to understand, this is a country that block internet. So Chinese scientists, they cannot even do proper research because oftentimes they have difficulties to access free information. And the whole situation of brainwash and propaganda and human rights abuses actually blocked Chinese scientists from fully able to do their research. So this is just something the Chinese Communist Party has been operating for decades. And with Americans very naive about the nature of the Communist Party, we allowed all of this to happen in the U.S.
Yeah, the American people are being, too many Americans, those on the left are being misinformed about communism. And they lack curiosity to conduct historical research because the information is readily available to research. But these young folks, these anarchists in Portland, Oregon, and these the folks on the left, they think that our system is bad and that socialism/communism is better.
Yes, I mentioned last week that about the infiltration of the Chinese Communist Party in our education system, and that has been going on for decades. I talk about the Confucius Institute and how our high school teachers and professors were recruited to China for nice trips and give lectures and then come back to feed all this propaganda to their students. And actually, one of the reasons that Chinese consulate was shut down in Houston, I heard that they have been sponsoring some of these protesters in many cities in the United States. And actually, according to some reports I read on the Chinese Epoch Times, that's the biggest media outlet for uncensored news about China. In some of the protests, people found some protesters, they were Chinese, and they were organized by the Chinese consulate to be there. So it is actually more complicated than what it appears superficially.
It's deeper. And in fact, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo recently stated that securing freedoms from the Chinese Communist Party is the mission of our time. It's very serious, folks. And the left, Democrats, have had the American people fixated on Russia. This is wrong-headed. It's misleading.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
This is reason enough not to vote Democrat or for Biden. Do you remember when Biden said something to the effect, he spoke about China? Oh, China, a threat? Are you kidding? He fluffed it off. Remember, folks, when Biden said that? Yeah. See, politicians can't be trusted. This is why politicians have been all the politicians have been corrupt. This is why we voted for Trump, because he is not an establishment or rather typical politician. He's different. He brought in something different. Something that he brought in what? America first. Why shouldn't we be for America first? Why don't more people know about communism? Why aren't they learning about communism/socialism in the education system? Why aren't people taking it upon themselves to study it historically? Why? What's wrong with us? That's the question.
Yeah, I agree with you because I feel like Americans, including many of my colleagues, they are very, in another way of saying, like they are very brainwashed by some of these media who carried the lies or propaganda of the Chinese government. Like I mentioned last time, that Los Angeles Times carried 11 pages of newspaper insertions paid by the Chinese government. It's called International Daily. It was paid advertisement, but they look exactly like news reports. So many people would mistaken that as Los Angeles Times reports, but all of those 11 pages just praised how well China treated the coronavirus, how nice Chinese government was to Chinese students and American students in China. And all of this propaganda was fed to us by Los Angeles Times. And actually, China already spent $6 million to Wall Street Journal and $4.6 million to New York Times to carry this kind of insertion, this kind of so-called advertisement, but they look like news reports.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's a hashtag on Twitter, Democrats, the enemy within. Now, if you do any study, historical study, you know communism is not a good thing. I think they killed more than 100 million people. And it's an economic system that does not work. It's not beneficial. So the left, Democrats, are the enemy within. And we must include the media. The media, it's actually treason, I would say, to work. They're working against America and the American people. They're working against us. So it behooves us, the American people, to get informed, to learn what's going on, to know what's going on in the society, to understand. And the whole Black Lives Matter thing was just oh my gosh, it's completely it's misleading. And in fact, the founders, I mentioned this before, the founders of Black Lives Matter, 3 lesbians, and they're supposed to be interested in the interest and well-being and welfare of black men. I don't think so. But they conceded to be trained in Marxist ideology. Now we know there's enough research out there to know that Marxist ideology does not work, is not a good thing. So why would people, that shows you how superficial too many people are and misguided by the media. Anyway, we're going to take a break, and I want to say before we go to break that, yes, I take Balance of Nature. Do you know? You know. I've been saying it since they've been a sponsor of the show, and I encourage you to try it. I'm in my 8th month, I think. Yeah, I can't remember. I think so. I've passed the 7-month mark, and I really don't need to look at my notes that much. I have a lot of energy, and I go for a walk every day. Every day I walk at least 1.6 miles. It's a good thing. I encourage you to go to the Naked Truth Report website and or go to, Balance of Nature website, balanceofnature.com. Put in Naked Truth and get a 35% discount. We're talking to bioscientist at Caltech, Dr. Chen. She informed us last week that communist China deliberately, intentionally knew weeks before, if not months before, that coronavirus was transmitted was transmittable human to human. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll probably take some phone calls maybe. I don't know. We'll decide. We'll be right back. This is the Naked Truth Report. I'm your host, Kathleen Wells. Welcome back. We're speaking with bioscientist Dr. Chen. This is part 2. Last week she informed us that China, communist China, intentionally did not inform the world about coronavirus. They knew weeks before, if not months before. Also, you heard my ad, JFK versus the CIA. That's a book. Michael Cutler is the author. I'm going to read that book. I'm going to have him in. But that makes me thinking about that book and thinking about today makes me think what hashtag the enemies within America. We are American. We are American citizens. Why don't we put America first? Why do we have enemies within this country? Hashtag Democrats are the enemy within. Why? Because they support socialism and the media. You heard Dr. Chen talk about the Los Angeles Times article, the Harvard professor arrested for spying or infiltrating. Give us some more information, Dr. Chen.
About the infiltration to stealing intellectual property. And we have heard quite a few news in the past year about China's Southern Talents Program. Basically, Southern Talents Program means like they already recruited about 8,000 scientists all over the world to establish shadow labs in China. So these are Western scientists, you may think naive, okay, yeah, we are going to help China to develop technology, but the requirement of Southern Talents Program is they can only work part-time in China and part-time in the United States. So by working in both countries, they are able to know the progress of the labs in the U.S. that is funded by the U.S. Taxpayers' money. At the same time, they copy the technology in China. And so the story of the Harvard University department chair was just one of them. There are quite a few news reports, especially in Texas. They have been doing a lot to the researchers to take medical research information about virus vaccine and many all these critical area that can help China to be advanced in vaccine development and also develop artificial intelligence, especially because China has been using artificial intelligence to monitor dissidents and monitor the distance in China, the facial recognition, all of this stuff is very, very advanced in China. They can actually use artificial intelligence to recognize, even if you have your face covered, they can recognize your body movement to tell who you are. And all of these technology, they steal a lot from United States universities and United States companies. And actually, one of the incident was that Huawei. We talk about Huawei, and actually just had some lawsuits a couple of years ago about they had been stealing technology from T-Mobile. They send people to T-Mobile pretending to be engineer, collaborating with them, and just took some electronic device, they took them out, made copies, and then returned them. So Huawei was sued for stealing T-Mobile technology in 2018. That was just one of the stories. There are actually many, many stories like that.
Mm-hmm. So how do you... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, so that's just a part of the story, about the United States. This is actually applied all over the world. In my previous talk, last week I only mentioned the China's infiltration to the United States, but that's not just limited to the United States. The infiltration of the Communist parties all over the world. It's just how they spread the coronavirus all over the world. We blocked China. President Trump had the travel ban towards Chinese tourists very early, in February, but actually coronavirus actually invaded the United States from Italy, from Europe. And that's just one example of how the China's communication with European countries. And I want to mention China's Belt and Road project. It sounds like a very nice project, at the beginning, just from the face value. Basically, it's a plan to build infrastructure for these third world countries, and invest to these third world countries to help to build like airports, build like ports for them. And sounds very nice. Like China will say, oh, we're going to build this luxurious hotel for you. We're going to build this very nice airport for you. We're going to borrow you the money. Don't worry about any expense. You can return them later. And then these actually projects are charged very, very high. And that is also involved with corruption with the local government. For example, in Malaysia, the former prime minister actually was bribed by the Chinese government to sign the Belt and Road project. And then after the re-election, a new prime minister was elected. People found that the previous prime minister got all this money in his personal account and signed the Belt and Road project to build the infrastructure of Malaysia. And eventually the country cannot return the debt. It was so expensive. And China sent all these construction workers from China. They don't really hire any local workers. So basically it's a very, very expensive project. They actually use construction workers from China. Everything was from China, and then they give you a huge bill. And what will happen once a country fall into this financial trap? And China will say, oh, don't worry about money. You can return us later, and you just need us to use the airport for 99 years. Actually, Sri Lanka lost one of its most important ports, Hambantota Port, was given to China on a 99-year lease because Sri Lanka cannot pay for the debt of the Belt and Road project. So through this, China can expand its military influence. And once China controls the infrastructure of your country, they can shut down your country with one button because they control everything. And this country will always need to follow the order of China. Whatever the Chinese government wants them to do, they will have to do that. And Belt and Road project, a few months ago I saw there was 152 countries were signed into China's Belt and Road project. So gradually China used this project to turn smaller countries or economically fragile countries into their colonies. They already turned the whole Africa, almost the whole Africa, into its colonies.
Isn't that
and
something?
That's how China controlled the United States. I've always heard people saying, oh, the United Nations. That's how China controlled the United Nations. And many people say, oh, why doesn't the United Nations say anything against human rights in China? Why does not WHO say anything about China? Why does WHO always copy what the Chinese government said? And if you look at the 15 agents under the United Nations, China already lead 4 of them. They are the headers. They are the representative of 4 out of 15 UN agents. And the other agents, almost China has been holding important roles in them, in almost all of them. It's very easy because United Nations has this rule, every country has one vote, right? So if you can control many, many small countries, you get tons of votes. And nobody will be able to compete with China because they spend so much money on Belt and Road project. They can easily ask dozens of countries to vote for candidates that China endorses, or someone from China to run for the position.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say United Nations, we already lost. We already lost United Nations.
Oh no!
And that's why I highly support the act of United States leaving WHO because it's only misleading. It's only misleading. If we did not follow what the WHO said, we would have done much, much better. And that was why Taiwan did so well, because Taiwan was excluded from WHO, and that's why Taiwan did not depend on WHO. Ever since the first news from China came out, Taiwanese, they can read Chinese, okay? They can read Mandarin. They can read Chinese internet. And they found all these rumors, quoted rumors on Chinese internet about the coronavirus in December. And they actually sent people to China to investigate. They sent people to Wuhan to find out what's going on. And they were one of the first nations in the world to screen Chinese visitors, to block China from entering Chinese passengers from entering Taiwan. That's why they did so well in controlling coronavirus. And the rest of the world, all of us, failed because of WHO, because WHO copied whatever Chinese government said.
Yes.
And even if you don't believe in the Chinese government, you believe in WHO, right? Because you believe they're experts.
Right.
And they told you, like, oh, it's not dangerous. It's not human-to-human transmission.
Right.
There's no need to block the traffic. There's no need to wear masks. And isn't that what WHO told us?
Right.
In the very beginning? And even just recently, like, hundreds of scientists already wrote letters to WHO, reminding WHO that the coronavirus is very likely to be transmitted by air. That means like any circulation in the air can circulate the coronavirus, and WHO refused to accept that. They refused to accept the scientist's statement, like because we already observed many situations, like in New York, about 80% of newly infected cases in May or June, they were from people quarantined at home. They never went anywhere. They had been staying at home. They got infected. And the only conclusion was that because the virus density was so high, they got it in the air, right? Because they never left home. They were never in touch with anyone outside of their home. But the WHO did not say anything about this. It's just like the very beginning. Taiwan wrote letters to WHO on December 31st, say this coronavirus is human-to-human transmission because the Wuhan hospitals has been quarantining the nurses and doctors who contacted with patients, and they quarantine the patients. If it's not human-to-human transmission, why do you need to quarantine them? But the WHO ignored all these letters written by Taiwan. Mm-hmm. And that is just one example of how WHO, they already lost their function.
Yeah. They're under the influence of the Communist Party. Chinese Communist Party. And so when Mike Pompeo says that securing our freedoms from the Chinese Communist Party is the mission of our time, this is serious, folks. You see how we were misinformed about coronavirus. We were not informed timely. And look how the repercussions, how we have been impacted by that misinformation or omission of information, and how we've been impacted by what the WHO has said to us. This is serious, folks. This is impacting our livelihood, our pocketbook, our kids going to schools. Do you understand? The Democratic Party is the enemy within. Not enough people who are left-leaning and Democrat voters are listening and open-minded to this information. And the media is spewing Chinese propaganda to the American people. And it all ties in. It actually ties into JFK and the CIA. It's all interrelated. I always say that. Everything is interrelated and interconnected. Propaganda is being fed to the American people. The enemy is within. That's a hashtag. The enemy is the Democratic Party and the media, and they're within America. They do not have the interest of the American people. Do you understand? And more people need to get this information. The threat is not Russia, but China. And we've wasted. Listen, Trump is our only, what do we want to say? He is the only thing that stands between us and being under the thumb of the Communist Party. Do we all want, you see how our lives in Los Angeles have been adversely impacted by these Democrat-made Garcetti and, Newsom. They don't want us to go back to the kids going back to school. It's all crap, the virus, because they misled us about hydrochloroquine, the treatment, and zinc. Dennis Prager talks about that. It's all misleading and propaganda. And Trump is the only one that all these politicians are corrupt except Trump. He's the only one that has been willing to go up against China, to face her square on All these other politicians, they've been wimps in the face, and they've sold themselves out. They sold out the American people to China. You feel sorry for Africa. She's gone. That's all. You're going to be do you want to be under the thumb of the Communist Party or not? That's the question. And I hope Trump really hammers this home to the American people in the media. Do you want to be under the thumb of the Communist Chinese government? Okay, so I'm going to let Dr. Wen Chen close out. We have 4 more minutes. Can you close out, Dr. Chen, please?
Yes, I want to mention, like last time, I heard from Kathleen that many people want to get in touch with me. So I'm going to offer my email here. You can email wenchenSpeaker@gmail.com. That's one word. Wen, W-E-N, is my first name. Chen, C-H-E-N, is my last name. And I'm a public speaker on human rights in China. And I also spoke on the Chinese Communist Party's infiltration to the world. So it's wenchenSpeaker@gmail.com. And you can always get in touch with me about where I'm going to speak next.
Wonderful. So that's Wen Chen, WENCHEN, speaker@gmail.com. And you can get in touch with Dr. Wen Chen. So I'm so grateful to have you. Maybe we'll do a part 3. I don't know. Also, I want to say that I'm going to read JFK versus the CIA and have the author Michael Cutler on. And we can maybe tie it into this hashtag, the enemy within. Yes, we have the enemy within the United States, and it's the Democratic Party. Hashtag Democratic Party enemy within. Also, the media. The media is misleading. I can't press this enough. But I know that my listeners know this. I'm like singing to the choir, right? We need to get to people who aren't. Listen, folks, start telling your friends and neighbors. Start getting the word out what's going on. Also, I'd like to ask you to go to my YouTube channel. I have a lot of listeners. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel because I'm going to start live streaming on Instagram, the radio show. I'm going to be doing that relatively soon. I'll figure it out. But I want to start doing the Naked Truth Report on Instagram, doing that live, because I see Larry's there. So if Larry's there, I can get there too, right? Also, I see the morning show on Instagram. And also, so go to my YouTube channel, the Naked Truth Report YouTube, and subscribe. Todd is laughing. Why are you laughing, Todd? I'm doing a great job. He said, I thought he was laughing at me because I'm like pumping my YouTube channel. Listen, all my listeners to the show, I think I have about 30,000 listeners, so I should have 30,000 subscribers, no? And also share, I download or upload rather this show to the YouTube channel. Share this, interview with Dr. Wen Chen on YouTube. Go to my YouTube channel, share it on your social media. We got to get it out there, folks. We all we're Americans and we have a responsibility to America. Isn't that what JFK said, asked not what you can do for your country, but what was it? Oh, I got to have Michael Cutler say that. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Get on my YouTube channel and share this interview on your social media with Dr. Wen Chen. Thank you, Dr. Wen Chen.
Thank you.
See you. Maybe we'll do another show. We'll probably have Michael Cutler next week if I read the book, and then we'll do something else. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I'm indecisive. Thanks for listening, folks, to the Naked Truth Report. I'm your host, Kathleen Wells, and I love you, so I'll be back next week. Bye.